Welcome to your weekly airplane news update. This is the week of February 14th, 2022. This week we got 4 topics. First one is a U2 pilot helped an emergency aircraft earlier this week. We'll talk about Tecnam that is, testing a hybrid aircraft and they completed their first flight. We'll talk about Jeppesen that's adding backcountry airstrips to their charts. And then lastly, Skylane, the Cessna Skylane is coming back with the turbo version. This had been gone for a while and then now it's back. So let's get to it. All right, before we get into, the nitty-gritty of this week, there was actually a piece of news that just came out last minute, and so I figured we should talk about it. The FAA Administrator Dixon, has decided to resign. This was announced late on Wednesday night, and he sent a message to his staff and to people saying that essentially it's time for him to be done. He's been spending a lot of time in DC and is looking to spend more time with his family. I'm sure a lot of the issues that have recently happened, especially with the 5G, has kind of helped his decision. In the meantime, the deputy administrator, his name is Bradley Mims, is going to take over his duties, and then I'm sure there will be some kind of a hearing to get the next administrator in place. So we thought you should know, so let's move on to the next story this week. And the first story this week is a U2 pilot helped an aircraft that was in an emergency. That happened on February 8th of 2022. There was a civilian aircraft. They experienced an engine failure that was over Lake Berryessa, and they were looking for a place to land. The problem is that they were in an area where they couldn't get any kind of signal back to a control tower. And so what happened is that the U2 pilot relayed the mayday to Oakland ATC, and then they alerted the local authority. 30 minutes after the mayday, the airplane went down, and they were actually found by California Highway Patrol, and then they actually had landed safely in the field. So that's a good news and something good that happened. The next story this week is Tecnam is coming up with their P2010 H3PS. It's a hybrid aircraft, and they made their first flight late December of 2021. The interesting part about the aircraft, it's a hybrid aircraft. It's powered by a 135 horsepower Rotax engine. It's a Rotax 915, and it's also coupled with a 30 kilowatt Rolls-Royce engine. It's an electric motor. And the idea of the test was to make sure or show that this hybrid configuration can actually have the same useful load as a equivalent 180 horsepower combustion engine. The electric motor is interesting. It's used to create additional torque when needed. Think about it as a NOS booster maybe. And it's good for takeoff and climb, for example. So if you wanted to add more torque, then you can use that smaller engine. And the small battery that's attached to it can be recharged in between because, they have a smaller battery because it's not used the entire time. It's just used whenever you need it. So I think this is a pretty interesting concept. They said that it's not designed for production at the moment. I think they're just doing some testing to see if this hybrid configuration makes any kind of sense. Okay, the next story this week is backcountry airstrips are being added to the Jeppesen database. And this is a collaboration between Aviation, Jeppesen, and the Recreational Aviation Foundation that will allow these backcountry airstrip to be added to the Jeppesen new database. This includes private use airstrip, unimproved airstrips, or what's called backcountry airstrips. And the person in charge of the RAF basically said, our goal is to promote backcountry flying and to encourage more pilots to join us on the adventures of flight. And the aviation community is fortunate to have a friend like Aviation who recognizes the value of these off the beaten path aviation destination. I think this is pretty cool. Just adds more places for people to fly that enjoy this type of flying. All right, the last story this week is Cessna is coming back with the T182T. This is a turbo version of the Cessna Skylane, and orders are currently open. They expect delivery to begin in 2023. Now, the Skylane has a base price of $653,000, which, thinking about it, is actually not that much considering that a 172 brand new is a little north of $400,000 these days. This will feature a G1000 avionics with a GI 275 electric standby as a backup. You have a constant speed propeller with 3 blades, electric de-ice, and in-cabin oxygen as well in the aircraft. It's turbocharged. It has a TIO 540 engine on it, And then the cruise speed is 165 knots at flight up to flight level 200. And it's got a range of 971 nautical miles. Useful load is really, really close to 1,000 pounds. So pretty cool aircraft. Not cheap, obviously, but it's interesting that they would bring back this turbo version after they had kind of abandoned it for a little while. Okay, this is all I have for you this week. As always, like, subscribe, leave your comments, and we'll be happy to interact with you. And then we'll see you next week.